this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so as you can see from the title page of today's episode, we're looking at rum. And why not? I like rum. And I've had a few come my way of recent, a couple of which are sort of brand new bottlings, couple that have been around for some time. And I just thought it would be nice to have a look at something a little different. But before we do, just a quick thank you to everyone who commented on last week's episode of the show on Jura, and a really big thank you to the distillery for retweeting my tweet. I mean, to say that that was unexpected, considering, should we say, the critical analysis that I made of their new range, or as somebody said, oh, you eviscerated them, and I think that's probably harsh. I think it was, like I said, a more critical analysis, shall we say. So either the distillery are really quite cool and quite happy with, you know, people having an opinion about their whiskey, even if they don't particularly like that opinion, or they didn't actually watch the show and just retweeted my tweet. One of the two. But anyway, but thank you to everyone that commented and what have you. And I don't think this is going to be such a harsh critical analysis this week. Well, at least I hope it's not. Anyway, so the rums that we're looking at today, I've got three pairs, and obviously we've got two bottlings that were released kind of tail end of last year by Diplomatico, highlighting their individual stills. I think they're calling them the sort of distillery collection or something like that, which I thought were really quite interesting. We've got two very brand new bottlings from Richard Seale's Foursquare Distillery, which obviously we'll talk about more when we get to them. And there's a link with the other two bottlings called the Real McCoy, which I believe Richard was behind. And before we start, I have to say, marketing spiel. The wonderful marketing spiel with the Real McCoy on their website is says the rums are single distilled in a rare combination of column and artisanal pot stills. Well, that's hardly a rare combination, is it? Come on! I mean, practically every rum distillery has got a selection of different stills, both column and pot, which is part of the attraction of rum. And you know, as you well know, when I did the episode of the show on the Diamond Distillery and their multitude of different stills, I mean, you know, this is one of the things I love about rum, the fact that not only have you got the different base materials you can work from, you've got the different still types. And then they go on to then authentically aged in heavily charred American oak bourbon barrels. Authentically aged, I mean, as opposed to what? Inauthentically aged? I mean, you know, why don't you just cut out all that sort of marketing drivel, to be bluntly honest with you, and just sort of say it's a combination of this, aged in that, you know, quality, yada yada yada. Why do you have to do all of this marketing nonsense that sort of, all right, yes, you can argue that they're really aiming it at people that have no real knowledge of rum, but you know, it grates on me anyway. I know I shouldn't sort of be harsh on those sort of things, but it does kind of like when the marketing gets a little bit silly, which is what it is. I mean, you know, although I've seen worse. But anyway, so while we're on, while we're on the subject of the Real McCoy, I may as well just sort of introduce this afternoon's little lineup, because we're going to start with those. Right, okay, so we're going to start with the two Real McCoy bottlings, a 5-year-old bottled at 40% and a 12-year-old also bottled at 40%. Now, there is a kind of interesting story-ish, I suppose, to the Real McCoy range, as they were put together by a chap called Bailey Pryor, who was making a documentary film about this chap called Bill McCoy, who was a rum runner during Prohibition, and allegedly, so the story goes, he parked his ship off the coast of the States, far enough to be in, I guess, in international waters, and sold his rum, which was apparently of very good quality, as opposed to the god awful gut rot that was being produced and shipped into the States during Prohibition. I mean, when you think about it, bizarre. I mean, why on earth would a government want to actually ban the sale of alcohol and lose an absolute arm and a leg in revenue? I mean, that makes absolutely no sense, but then America doesn't make any sense to me anyway. I mean, come on, they elected Donald Trump, for God's sake. Anyway, so basically there's this guy, Bailey Pryor, decided that he needed to get somebody on board that knew a little bit about rum, and well, Richard Seale knows probably a little bit more about rum. He probably has forgotten more about rum than I've ever known about rum. I mean, he's won countless awards and is a really nice guy. I met him once, and yeah, he's apparently a really nice bloke, apart from when he's being a bit grumpy, apparently. Aren't we all? As far as I'm aware, I mean, the information that is on their website seems to imply that the rum comes from the Foursquare distillery. It's the classic column and pot still, which Richard tends to use at the Foursquare distillery. So I'm hoping that this rum is going to be pretty good. I mean, if Richard's going to put his name and expertise to it, then one hopes so. So then we're going to look at two of Richard's day job, I suppose, the actual Foursquare distillery itself. The first bottling is called Premise, bottled at 40%. It features both pot and column still aged distilled rum, aged in a combination of American oak and sherry casks for about 10 years, blended together and whacked in a bottle at 46%. So that should be quite interesting. I mean, it carries on from... I mean, what I love about what Richard's doing at Foursquare is the experimentation, different cask types. I mean, he's done the Zinfandel cask finish, and that carries on to the second of the new bottlings, which is called Dominus, which is slightly different to the Premise in that it's spent 3 years in ex-American oak and then 7 years in ex-cognac casks. So could be quite interesting. I certainly know that, if you remember rightly, I looked at the Trois Rivières range some years ago, and their Cuvée de Moulin is exactly the same, aged for or finished in ex-cognac casks, although I think the spirit is a lot younger than 10 years old. So hopefully should be really, really interesting. And then we're going to look at like I said, the two single still releases from Diplomatico, or from the La Miel distillery, shall we say, to give it its full title. The first one we'll be looking at is the single Barbet, bottled at 40%. Now the Barbet is a double column continuous still. It arrived at the distillery in 1959 from France, and they tend to use it mainly for distilling their molasses-based rums. And yeah, I think this is kind of really interesting, because basically what the distillery tend to do is their first distillation will be in column still, and then the second distillation, depending upon the style of rum thereafter, will either be in the same column still, it will be the Barbet pot still, or the second bottling, which is the batch Kettle still, again bottled at 40%, and how old? About 6 years old, that one. I think the Barbet is slightly younger, it's 4 years old, so it could be quite interesting. Again, arrived at the distillery in 1959. This came from Canada, and the batch Kettle still, looking, if you look at it, looks like, well, essentially it's a copper tank with a rectifying column. I mean, it's not a pretty looking thing, it has to be said. It's obviously rather functional, should we say, and coming over from Canada, I believe it was originally used for making Canadian whiskey, and as you know, Canadian whiskey tends to have that sort of distinctive column stilly kind of rummy sort of character, which is really interesting. So it's nice to see sort of the distillery doing that sort of thing. I mean, certainly when you've got such a number of different stills available, and you obviously making a blend from those various stills, it's kind of interesting to sort of see, because you don't often, virtually never get the opportunity to taste sort of the spirit from the individual stills, to see how those particular stills impact upon the character of the distilled rum or whiskey or whatever, unless the distillery decides they're going to sort of release them, and they have in this case. And interestingly enough, I was reading a review of both of those particular releases on a website called the Fat Rum Pirate, and well, he wasn't very complimentary about them, shall we say. So but anyway, we don't, on the Good Dram show, we don't listen to anybody else. We make our own mind up, or I make my own mind up in the third person. That's a bit anyway. So that's enough of that. I think we'll kick off with some Real McCoy then, shall we? Now I believe that's where the expression "the Real McCoy" came from, because this chap Bill McCoy was selling good quality spirit or good quality rum as opposed to gut rot. But anyway, let's see what the homage to the rum runner is like. It's okay. The problem I have is it's got quite column still orientated character. I must admit, I don't know quite how much this is retailing for. It's a little bit edgy, a little bit young, and the biggest issue I have with youngish rums is that they really need about sort of 8 to 10 years before they've developed a sort of like a level of complexity. And more often than not, when you see a range of rums, they've deliberately made a youngish one purely for making cocktails and stuff like that. And this is probably no different to that. It's okay. It's got, like I say, a lot of column still dried fruit, and a bit of oak. I'm not really getting any kind of like weighty sort of pot still notes. That's right, I'm getting quite a lot of sort of charred oak, and distinctive American oak, vanillins now, and a little bit of coconut and banana. Yeah, it's okay. It's sort of not floating my my rum runner's boat, shall we say, but it's not too bad. Let's see what the part's like. It's a little bland, it has to be said. I mean, it lacks punch. I think it's a bit kind of underpowered at 40%. Yeah, it just doesn't really have the intensity. It's kind of a bit and yeah, there's some rummy dried fruits. There's more column still notes, bit of oak, but there's nothing really that sort of. I mean, I'm not arguing with the quality. The quality is absolutely fine, but it's just sort of a really just quite commercial. No, it's not. Yeah, commercial. It's commercial. It's a bit bland. It's kind of, sort of dried fruits. It's kind of like, I suppose, what people that are not particularly sort of well versed in the complexities of rum would sort of almost expect from a rum. It's kind of rum by numbers, if you like. So although, like I said, I don't think it's a bad spirit by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a little bit bland, to be honest with you. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 12-year-old. So expecting a little more from this, it has to be said. But again, this is bottled at 40%. But anyway, let's see what nose gives us. Loads of oak, maybe just too much oak. It's just overpowering the rum character. Yeah, there's possibly a little bit more weight to it. There's obviously a little bit more pot still character, but it's just like it literally is like a bourbon. I'm just getting so much bourbon notes that I think if you had this blind, you would actually struggle to say this is definitely a rum. I mean, because the oak is so obvious and so dominating, that's all you can pretty much smell, and so the balance is just completely half cocked. You know, it's I don't know what, because I can't really smell a great deal of spirit character. It's just kind of a bit, yeah, swamped. Anyway, let's see what the palate's on. It's weightier. There's a nice chocolatey note, which is noticeable, but again, a lot of oak. A lot of vanilla, little bittering on the finish. Again, it's a bit underpowered, it's underwhelming, it's a bit sort of like, where's the spark, where's the excitement with this? It's perfectly well made spirit, perfectly well, I think probably too much oak in the blend for me personally. I get the feeling that they're aiming for this very sort of commercial kind of style. We don't want anything weird in this. We don't want any we don't want any no fun. It's perfectly adequate, and I guess this is why the rep came in the other day from Walker Woodhouse, I think it was, saying, oh, we've just taken on these, and I've seen the Real McCoy bounce around a number of different distributors, so I get the feeling that sort of they change distributors, they get a bit of an initial spurt, and well, I don't know if I'm going to be really honest. I think people kind of like go, well, bit boring really at the end of the day, and kind of sales then die off and they move on to somebody else. I mean, I'm probably being overly harsh here, but certainly I know how the sort of the distribution stroke agency kind of business works, and at the end of the day, brands change distributors for one reason and one reason only, generally, and that is sales or the lack thereof. And obviously we've had that with regards to some of our wine producers. You know, we've not generated the sales that they were hoping for, and so they bugger off to somebody else. You know, I suppose it's slightly different in spirits, in wine to spirits, because obviously with wine you have the vagaries of vintages, whether they're wanted, all that kind of stuff, and sometimes you do your best, and you know the growers don't sort of seem to appreciate the market conditions, and the fact is that if people don't want to buy your bloody wine, they ain't going to buy it, no matter how bloody good it is, you know. So okay, but anyway, I'm digressing, and it's all right. It's rum, isn't it? Yeah. We're ready to start again. Right, okay, so on to Richard's day job. Let's see what yes, we are looking at the premise. So a combination of American oak aged and sherry cask. Let's see what those give us. Oh, that's lovely. That's got a lovely aromatic, spicy, oily, sort of edging towards Guyana-y sort of edginess to it. Little bit of molasses, little bit of pot still. Again, the sort of the column still seems to be the most prevalent of dried fruit on the nose. Little bit of vanilla on the back end, and the sherry is very, very subtle. It's adding a little bit of kind of oloroso-y kind of spice, a little bit of tobacco leaf smoke. And that is lovely. I mean, yeah, I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. That is good rum. That's everything that, to be honest with you, the Real McCoy absolutely isn't. You know, it has loads of character, loads of intensity. And yes, I know it's bottled at 46%, but you know, it just goes to show you that sometimes 40% is just a little bit too lacking. I mean, I don't know whether that's me personally, and whether I'm my palate is now so attuned to tasting bloody high ABV spirits. I don't know that anything less than 46% tastes like water. But oh, it's just this lovely nose. Really, very, very nice. Let's see what the palate's like. Oily, high-toned, column still dried fruits, dried banana, dried apricot, pineapple. Again, the sherry is quite subtle. It kind of comes through right towards the end. I'm getting a little bit of tannin, a little bit of chocolatey notes. There's some molasses notes as well, some slightly heavier pot still, molassy kind of character. Elegant, nicely spiced. I think the nose is a little bit more interesting than the palate, but I think the palate is very enjoyable, and it has a good progression, good complexity, and a nice amount of age to it. It's just got the right amount of age, I think. So so yeah, nice. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Dominus. So this is 3 years in American oak and 7 years in ex-cognac casks. Let's see what those gives us on this then, shall we? That is lovely. Again, more emphasis on the column still character. But it's got some lovely kind of combination of rummy dried notes and sort of cognac-y dried notes. There's some dried lime, incense, almost kind of desperately trying to figure out what that fruit note is, and I know the note and I know the name, and I just tamarind. It's got some tamarind juice. A little bit of wood smoke, warm vanillins, grippy French oak tannins. This is absolutely stunning. I mean, I just love that combination. I'm also getting a little bit of apple note as well. The cognac does start to sort of maybe become a little more dominating, but oh, it's absolutely lovely. That really is nice. I'm getting a lovely smokiness. It's got a great weight, but an elegance and a lightness to it as well. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic. And again, you know, it's got the intensity which 46% brings to the table. Let's see what the palate's like. Oh my God, that's got an incredible progression. Kind of opens up with more of the weightier pot still kind of character. Then you get the cognac, French oak, grippy slightly woody tannins, and then you get the column still notes kind of coming through on the end. You get that lovely kind of almost Guyana-y sort of oily underripe banana, green banana, vanilla, spice, tobacco, again wonderfully grippy tannins, intensity. That's what this has. This has intensity by the bucketful, which I'm afraid the Real McCoy doesn't. The Real McCoy is all very but this kind of grabs you. I mean, this really does. And the combination of dried fruit characters and the progression and the depth and the complexity and the layering is absolutely spot on. So I'm disappointed, I think, really with the Real McCoy, and considering, you know, Richard Seal is behind that, they are just really disappointing, whereas the Foursquare bottlings are absolutely fantastic, really good, yeah, damn good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the single Barbet. So molasses based spirit and column still distilled. Let's see what the nose gives us. It's got a lovely elegance to it, and it's got a lovely combination of thick molasses character and light, high-toned column still dried fruits. Touch of smokiness, a bit of tobacco leaf. And the interesting thing, probably the most noticeable thing, is it's not particularly sweet. And as far as I believe, this particular rum hasn't been, well, sweetened post-distillation, which is what the Diplomatico range has a tendency to be. And as I probably said when I reviewed the range, a number of years ago now, they're pretty upfront about it. They say, yes, we do use sweetener, we use sugar after the distillation because that's how the Venezuelans like their rum. Brilliant, no issue with that whatsoever. But it's just really nice to see the people might say unadulterated spirit character coming through, and it has got a lovely balance between the molasses notes and the column still notes, and if you didn't know better, I would have said that this was a classic kind of pot and column still vatting, shall we say, but it doesn't quite have the sort of the pot still weight. It has the molasses notes and the molasses kind of dark kind of character, but it doesn't quite have the weight. It has the sort of the lightness of the column still, but and a touch of American oak as well. So it's all really, I think, really nicely balanced. And I must admit, I have to completely disagree with whoever writes the Fat Rum Pirate blog. This is certainly not dull by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe they've not tasted the Real McCoy. There's a lovely greenness to it as well, a sort of green herbalness kind of coming through. Almost kind of like sort of herbally Oloroso-y kind of notes, but again without the sort of like the Oloroso fruits. But I love this. I think this is excellent. This is very good. Let's see what the palate's like. Thick, weighty, more molasses on the palate, toffee, some nuttiness. The column still notes are kind of quite in the background, and I think if you blinked you'd miss them, to be honest with you. And I suppose knowing what the still is, you're kind of almost in essence searching for them. And you know, if you didn't know, you wouldn't necessarily pick up on them. And so it certainly kind of has a sort of pseudo-y sort of pot still character. Again, it doesn't quite have the weight of a pot still rum, but it certainly has the molasses and the thickness of a molasses based rum. We're not quite so much of the high tone notes. Again, a little bit of tobacco leaf, a little bit of spice, little herbal note as well. I like that. I think that's really an impressive rum. Full, rich, but not, again, overly sweet. And I think that's the defining factor for me, is that, you know, David left the rum alone. This is, to me, I mean, there might be a little bit of sweetness there. I mean, obviously, yeah, you do get some sweetness in the distillation process, obviously. It's not like, you know, you get absolutely zero sweetness, and every rum that shows a little bit of sweetness has had sugar added to it. It's not the case, but it's got a lovely natural kind of character. It's not like, say, the Reserva Exclusiva or what have you, which has that sort of, you know, real kind of sweetened character. Which people love. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, purists may well argue that it is not pure rum and it's got all these additives in inverted commas, but people like it, so that's why they're doing it. Right, okay, and finally we're on to the batch kettle still, the rather ungainly looking still. Interesting, they use sugarcane honey as their base material when they use the batch kettle still. Certainly that is a bit like Ron's Kappa, and I like Ron's Kappa because, again, it seems to me the sugarcane honey gives you that slight agricole kind of note, and it's a nice kind of lead in to the agricoles, which as you well know I like. But anyway, let's see what the nose is like on this end, shall we? Now this is a lot lighter. I mean, this has a real distinctive column still kind of character, which is unusual because you'd kind of expect it to have some of the weight of a pot still, because essentially it is a pot still with a rectifying column. And it does have a sort of slight sort of herbally, sub-agricole kind of character. There's a little bit of honey kind of coming through. Some lovely spice notes. Real sort of edgy kind of almost medicinal spice. Some lovely sort of taut American oak. It's not sort of soft and flabby. It's got a tightness to it. And again, not overly sweet, really natural, quite earthy, very earthy in actual fact, and I really like this. This is probably, of the two, I think this is certainly, nose-wise, my favourite. Absolutely wonderful. A little bit of roasted coffee kind of coming through now, sort of, you know, coffee bean as opposed to ground coffee. Let's see what the power's like. Oh, it's got a spicy finish. Spicy, tobacco-y, smoky. And it's only 4 years old, but it's got loads and loads of character. It's got loads of weight. It's got more kind of pot still kind of weight on the palate. And a slight herbalness. Again, it feels more molasses-like than an agricole-like, and it certainly doesn't quite have the sort of agricole notes that, say, Ron's Kappa has. But it has a lightness to it as well. I mean, it might sound a bit weird, but it has a sort of a weight and lightness as well. Wonderful depth fullness. You can argue that the palate could do with being a little more complex, but then, like I said, it's only 4 years old, but it's got loads and loads of interest, loads of character, and I mean, it's again, this is only bottled at 40%, the same ABV as the Real McCoy, yet it just has so much more intensity to it, and natural character. It's not it's not commercial, shall we say, which is maybe why the Fat Pirate doesn't particularly like it. I don't know, but there you go. I like it, and I suggest you buy it. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Firstly, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the distributors, Walker Woodhouse, Marussia Beverages and Speciality Brands for the samples for today's episode of the show. Really appreciate your support, guys, and although maybe Walker Woodhouse probably don't be too happy with me, but there you go. I think it's Walker Woodhouse. And I've taken on so many sort of new distributors that I've actually sort of ended up sending orders to the wrong people and going, I'll order, I'll have some of that, and then they email me back and go, that's not one of our brands, and I'm going, oops. So I do apologise if it's not Walker Woodhouse, but I'm pretty certain it is. But anyway, so anyway, the Real McCoy, dull. I mean, to be bluntly honest with you, I wouldn't bother with stocking it. I've got so many more interesting rums. It's commercial. It's got lots of waffle and faff and marketing, and it's kind of like, and the fact that Richard Seale's behind it really is really a bit disappointing, to be bluntly honest with you. The two Foursquare bottlings. Thankfully, Richard's day job is a damn sight better. I mean, I don't know. Who knows why these things happen? Maybe it's this kind of this Bailey Pryor. This is what he wanted from the rum. This was his kind of baby, and Richard just kind of went, all right, I'll put it together. There you go. What do you think? I don't know. But certainly the Dominus and the Premise are very, very good. Certainly, my favourite is the Dominus, and certainly that's the one that I opted to add to the Gauntley's range. I mean, I could have added the other one, but the problem is that sort of at the moment, even though loads and loads, I've read lots about how rum is going to be the next big thing because gin is on its way out, certainly not if sales are anything to go by. I mean, Christmas time, when you expect to sell quite a lot of rum and cognac, to be bluntly honest with you, the sales were very, very disappointing. And so maybe rum isn't due for a renaissance just yet. If the general customers are to be taken into account, maybe it'll be something else. Maybe, and I've read loads about how tequila and mezcal is going to be the next big thing. And it's a case of, well, okay, well, we'll see. Anyway, but kind of coming back to these two, really, really nice. You will not be disappointed by them, and the Dominus is bloody good. And the two single still bottlings from Diplomatico, really like them. Personally, I think they've got lots of character, lots of interest, and you're seeing the Diplomatico or La Miel distillery's spirit uncluttered by additional sugar, and it's kind of an insight into the character of their stills and the character of their spirit. And like I said, this is what I love about rum, the fact that you have the sort of the different base materials to play with, the different stills, different casks. Rum is a real complex animal, and there's so much you can do as a rum blender, which is why, sorry to hark back to the Real McCoy, but when you've got all these different raw materials and different stills and casks and all that, and you come up with something that's really quite bland, it is very, very disappointing. But on the flip side, there are some absolutely stunning rums on the market, and talking to someone. I'm going to have to do another episode, a Kill Devil episode of the show, really, aren't I? Because they are releasing some stunning stuff. But for now, I think this has hopefully been an interesting episode of the show, and all that's kind of left to say is good afternoon and good rally.